return to the top wasn't a climb. It was a violent, instantaneous teleportation. In the cutthroat theater of high finance, a man who possesses 24 hours of absolute, unyielding certainty is no longer just a traitor. He's a god walking among mortals. Ethan Vance, the man who only weeks ago scavenged for frostbitten sausages in overflowing trash cans, now sat in a velvet-lined private suite at the Pierre Hotel. His fingers, once gnarled by the permanent palsy of cold and hunger, no longer trembled with weakness. Instead, they vibrated with the electric, predatory thrill of a gambler holding a fixed deck in a room full of blind men. Every morning, long before the first hint of dawn bled across the Manhattan skyline, Ethan retreated to the slums. It was a place of shadows and broken glass that he now owned in secret, buying up the surrounding blocks just to ensure his sanctuary remained undisturbed. He would step out of a blacked-out limousine, his bespoke Italian leather shoes crunching on the same gravel where he once slept, and enter the rusted glass phone booth. The emerald-eyed cat was always there, waiting like a silent, fur-covered sphinx perched on the pitted metal shelf. The creature never meowed it, simply watched, its gaze heavy with a wisdom that predated the city itself. As Ethan's hand pressed against the grime-streaked glass, the neon torrent of tomorrow would erupt, flooding his vision with a blinding sapphire light. He didn't just see the closing prices of the S&P 500, he saw the digital pulse of the world. He saw headlines before the journalists had even opened their laptops. He saw corporate scandals before the whistleblowers found their courage. He watched the sudden violent surges of obscure penny stocks like a hunter watching a herd from the high grass. By noon, he would be millions of dollars richer, his bank accounts swelling like a tide. By evening, the entire market would be left reeling, whispering in terrified awe about how a ghost had outmaneuvered the billion-dollar algorithms of Wall Street's giants. But wealth was only half of the hunger that gnawed at his soul. He wanted back what his spectacular failure had burned away: the gaze of admiration, the feeling of being envied. And he found the perfect vessel for that desire in Isabella. She was a high society curator, a woman with a heart like polished ice and a tragic past she shared with no one. To Ethan, winning her heart wasn't an act of love. It was the ultimate high-stakes trade. He used the booth not just for wealth, but to engineer the perfect romance. He cheated at love the same way he cheated at the market. On their first dinner at a Michelin-starred balcony overlooking the park, he already knew her favorite vintage, a 1982 Bordeaux, before she even glanced at the wine list. He knew the hidden story behind the faint, jagged scar on her inner wrist, the one she kept habitually covered with silk sleeves. He offered comfort for a pain she hadn't yet mentioned, speaking words that seemed to heal wounds he had only seen through the glass of the oracle. The 24-hour booth allowed him to live the same date 100 times in the theater of his mind before they ever met. He practiced the exact tilt of his head, the precise length of his thoughtful pauses, and the seemingly accidental brushes of his hand against hers. He was the perfect man because he was a man who had already seen her every reaction, every blush, and every momentary flicker of doubt. Isabella fell for this engineered version of Ethan, unaware that her lover was a man living in a hollow loop of secrets, a puppet master whose strings were pulled by a rusted phone in a dark alley. Ethan bought her a penthouse that looked less like a home and more like a birdcage crafted from gold and reinforced glass, perched high above the swarming city. Everything within those walls was exquisite, curated to satisfy every sensory whim. The linens were the finest Egyptian silk that felt like water against the skin. The art on the walls consisted of masterpieces borrowed from the future's most prestigious auctions. The very air they breathed was filtered to a laboratory perfection, scrubbed of the city's grit and sin. Yet, as the weeks turned into a luxurious golden blur, a strange crystalline chill began to settle in Ethan's bones. He would stand on the expansive marble balcony, watching the miniature cars crawl like beetles below, feeling less like a king and more like a spectator in his own life. Everything Isabella said to him was a script he had already memorized. Every passionate kiss was a transaction he had already cleared in his mind 24 hours prior. There was no surprise, no spontaneity, no true life, only the mechanical repetition of a future he had already consumed. The emerald-eyed cat, now living in the penthouse on a diamond-encrusted silk cushion, rarely blinked. It watched Ethan with a gaze that grew heavier and more judgmental by the day. And then, the first real cracks in the oracle's gift began to appear. Ethan would reach into the back of his mind for a simple memory, the name of his favorite childhood dog, or the comforting smell of his mother's Sunday kitchen, and find only a blank, neon blue void. It was as if the booth was charging him a hidden tax. For every digital number that surged on the glass, a piece of his past was being erased, drained away into the ozone-scented air of the booth. He had the entire world at his feet, but he was starting to forget why he had ever wanted it in the first place. The golden cage was breathtakingly beautiful, but its bars were made of a time he could never truly inhabit, and a self he was rapidly losing.